Hello and you're very welcome to Kicking Match. My name is Peter Cinnamon and this is a podcast all about the Irish League. A league which might be getting into this whole t-shirt and sunglasses at games thing. But we don't want to admit it because our cousins have been into it for years and you know how that goes. Something we have been into for years is blaming the refs. And there was plenty of that this weekend. But like Wonderwall being played by a pub singer, yes, you know all the words and of course you're into it. But maybe, after all, were they justified? We're on the case. This week, Glenavon had to fight with only 9 men. Is that this week again? With only 9 men on the pitch, but they didn't get away with it. Meanwhile, Glentoran forgot to turn up for their first half again, but somehow did get away with it. Shevlin was silky, the Reds were lucky, and will Linfield ever play on a Saturday again? I'll stick the kettle on, and we'll sort this all out together. I've been in this podcasting game for, 2 weeks, but I know you as a listener, you have been in this world of Irish League podcasting for a lot longer, so why not bring in a familiar voice for this week? It's fair to say Kicking Match wouldn't be around if it wasn't for the likes of this man and others who ploughed the furrow with the much loved podcast The Social Club. It just wouldn't be the same, mainly because I completely ripped off the concept. He lives every Irish League day like it's his last, a trailblazer, a godfather of Irish League podcasting and one of the most respected sports journalists in the country. It's great to share the pod with Belfast Telegraph's Keith Bailie.
Thank you, Peter. That's a great introduction. That is, we did 250 odd episodes of the Social Club, and that's a better intro than we ever did. So you're already 1-0 up on the Social Club. So fair play to you.
You see, you get everywhere with compliments, Keith. That's what I'm learning. I'm a rookie, but just say nice things and people think you're not a bad bloke. But how does it feel back behind the mic, Keith? Have you got a lot of hot takes that they're ready for me?
I don't know. I was never really the hot take king in the Social Club land. I left all the big opinions to Mark McIntosh. My role was to try and introduce some kind of common sense and a bit of nuance or something at times. That's the way I looked at it. No, it was amazing. We really enjoyed doing the Social Club. It ran for from 2011 to 2018, so it was a really big undertaking, and it was like a real it was heart wrenching to kind of give it up, but like all our careers kind of moved on, and a few things had changed. A lot had changed from 2011 to 2018. It was a great thing to do. I think that it had quite a lot of influence and impact. Listening figures were never absolutely massive, but like, people still come up to me today and say, like, when are you going to bring that show back? It's like, well, it's not coming back, unfortunately. But it's great to see the likes of yourself has picked up the baton. And now we've got, like, a number of Irish League podcasts. Whereas when we started out back in 2011, like, we had to literally explain to people what a podcast was, which is really weird thinking about it now. But thankfully, times have changed.
For sure. There's always TikTok, Keith, if you want to get into that. You can start influencing people that way.
I don't think so. I don't think that's my game. I've watched a bit of TikTok and I don't understand it. It seems it's very confusing. I certainly don't want to do any dances. That seems to be the main thing it's for, and dancing is not my thing.
Do you miss getting involved, doing the podcasting thing? For those who weren't aware of the Social Club, it was you and other journalists sitting down, and what was really trailblazing about it was that it was giving analysis of the game in a new way, in a new format. It felt like you were all engaging with the game and were giving criticisms and praise in a different manner that you would see either on the written page or covered by other broadcasters. Do you sometimes get the itch the odd time going, oh, you know what, I'd love to jump in the studio with the rest of the guys and really knuckle down on this issue?
Well, I think when we closed the Social Club in 2018, I said that I would love to do another podcast, but when I did it, I'd like to be paid for it. I think that's the main difference. We lost a fair bit of money on the podcast because it was on the Social Club, because it was kind of like, it was pre being able to do things like this, recording at home with half decent quality. So we hired a studio, quite a famous studio, Start Together Studios, done a lot of great bands from Belfast and beyond, recorded in there. So we hired that out at our own expense. We got sponsors in as it went on. But I do miss it a bit. I do miss the... I think what we try to do, what some other podcasts, and this isn't a criticism at all, they bring in people connected with clubs and they interview them. And that's great. But sometimes when you interview players or you interview managers, there's only so much they can say. They can't maybe be as honest as what a journalist can be, potentially. So what I liked about our format at that time, and I think you're doing something similar, is we debated topics. We didn't shy away from talking about things that were controversial. We didn't shy away from going through each match and discussing things in a bit of detail, and we delved into smaller clubs and smaller leagues and stuff like that, which was a lot of fun. Sometimes other podcasts can just be retelling of old stories and that sort of thing, and that's maybe not so much my bag, but that's the way it is.
I could not agree more, and we've got plenty to get into this week. There was 6 games as well as other bits of news. You are well known as a key man who follows Ards. I really want to get into that story about the ground. That will come up later, but let's get into the thick of it, and we go to Friday night and a game between two teams at the Oval where it felt as though this was their first big proper test of the season. Could Crusaders keep up that momentum from their flashy dismantling of Dungannon, and could Mick McDermott get his Glentoran side up and running after a stuttering start to the season against Larne? The Glen men secured the 3 points, but it was a game which it ebbed, it flowed, and it evolved as it went on. I felt the Crews looked sharpest early, and then Glentoran took over. How did you see it?
Well, I'll straight up confess that I didn't watch the live broadcast because I was watching the Villagers in Bankers Wall Garden, which was a great gig. But this was apparently great as well, and I've caught up with the goals. That's a really impressive win for Glentoran. Crusaders have had a great run. They didn't have a great season last year by any measure. Obviously, it ended well with the Irish Cup, but they went on a really good run towards the end of last season. It looked like they carried that momentum into the new season. Decent run in Europe. Charity Shield win for whatever that's worth, and then a great win against Dungannon Swifts. Ben Kennedy was absolutely magnificent in that 5-1 win. Glentoran, on the other hand, well, they haven't really been great. Last season ended really poorly. They didn't qualify for Europe. Then the opening day of the season, draw away to Larne is never a bad result for anyone, let's be fair, but probably wasn't a performance to get you Glenmen standing up excited for the new season. There's a lot of fuss off the pitch. Not everybody likes Mick McDermott. I think that's well documented, as in within the Glentoran support. So I was expecting Crusaders to win this. It seemed like they were the team that had, I don't want to say momentum because that's a horrible cliche, but they seemed to have the upper hand going into this. So for Glentoran to turn around and win it, and to win it relatively well, I think that's a bit of a statement victory for the Glens, and it says that Glentoran are going to be competitive this year, which there was maybe a danger that people thought that wouldn't be the case. Glentoran should be competitive. Their team is great on paper. Aidan Wilson's a good signing, obviously played very well against his old team and scored an important goal.
Yeah, it really shifted at half-time. I thought Crusaders did bring that momentum in, and it was all coming through Ben Kennedy, and Ross Clark got the early goal and he looked super sharp on his 150th appearance. But then Ben Kennedy gets an injury about 15 minutes in. He comes off. On comes Ebe, and as much as throughout that half they were pushing on, throwing men forward, it just wasn't the same. Albeit the Glens didn't really do much in the first half. It just seemed to be long ball after long ball, and Crusaders were happy to deal with that all day. But Jay Donnelly came off at halftime due to an injury. McDermott changed up the shape, and then it was that penalty slightly after the break that really shifted momentum. It was a handball from a sliding tackle. McMenamin steps up, he slots it home, and all of a sudden then Crusaders, they pushed men forward again. They left themselves a bit more open. Glentoran came into the game. That long ball was being put on the deck again, and players like McMenamin just had the chance to dip and dive and really show the skill that they have. It feels like he's now arrived for this season, and from that penalty they pushed on. They eventually got the third goal, and they really ran away with it at the end. For Crusaders, the question is moving forward. Against Dungannon, they were flat track bullies. Against a big team like Glentoran, a bit of nous seemed to be the thing that won over, and it was maybe the depth for Crusaders. They have had a bit of a transfer window, but they haven't got a lot of real bodies that are going to challenge for that starting 11. Ebe needs a bit of a chance to find his feet in the league. I felt like he was a downgrade from Ben Kennedy. Anybody really would be, but I agree with you. That's a big win for Glentoran, and I think they needed it early on in the season to start things going, because we can see how Linfield are just flying out the gates with these wins, albeit against lower opposition. Glentoran didn't want to get caught behind too early.
Yeah, big time.
And the Oval was a place where they struggled last season. And for their first game against a top 6 side, they'll be delighted with the win.
It's massive for them. It's one that kind of sets things in motion. Like, it's a big statement win early in the season. And there's pressure on Glentoran. There's pressure on McDermott. There's pressure on a lot of the teams in the top 6, because we've got this thing where we've probably 6 clubs there who all see themselves as teams who should be at the very least qualifying for Europe, and 6 into 4 doesn't go. And inevitably a couple of teams will be disappointed, and Mick McDermott at Glentoran, like Tiernan Lynch at Larne, will come under a lot of pressure if they don't deliver European football. But they've got Coleraine there. You've got Crusaders, Stephen Baxter. Like, they are reliable in the sense that they consistently churn out top 3, top 4 finishes. So there's a lot of pressure. It's a big year for Glentoran, specifically for Mick McDermott and the project he's undertaken there. So if they can build off the back of that and get a few wins in a row, then it's a good start for them.
Question still remains, and I think I see it online from Glens fans. Do they know? They have plenty of talent, they have plenty of bodies, but do they know this starting 11 which they're going to build upon? I think Aidan Wilson's really nailed on now. He started strong in those first 2 games, but looking at that game, I couldn't tell who was playing in midfield and at the back. Reece Marshall was in the mix there. Singleton was defence, and then he was pushed up. I still don't know who that starting 11 for the Glens is. And maybe that's a good thing. They're going to find their place, and ultimately the cream will rise to the top. But it's tough when you see Linfield knowing exactly it's Kirk Miller and other players like that. They're just not as settled at the minute.
No, that's true. The Glens aren't as settled in that format. I mean, I think, like, the concept of starting 11s, what's your first choice starting 11, is probably pretty outdated, even at Irish League level. It is a squad game, and there always will be an element of squad rotation, and the Glens have plenty of depth. Sometimes it feels like a little bit of a confused picture. Sometimes it's hard quite to track when they sign a player where that player is going to fit into their team, because they've maybe an overload of quality centre forwards, for example, and it's difficult to know how they're going to fit that all in. Then you kind of have the element of having somebody like, Reece Marshall, who can play several different positions, slung into the middle of it. So it's hard sometimes yeah, I know what you mean. If trying to pick Mick McDermott's starting 11 on any given Saturday, you may as well try and pick the 6 lotto numbers, because it's hard going. He's got options. It's up to McDermott to try and fashion a solid starting 11 out of it. If he can, find the win formula there, like Glentoran can challenge for the league title. They have enough quality there. The big question is, can he actually take that squad and mould it into a formidable outfit? Because they haven't really been that yet.
I totally agree. McMenamin did get up and running for the season there on Friday, but he came off after a pretty zesty tackle from Josh Robinson. He got away with it on the night. Was it a red card for you?
Yeah, I thought so. I thought it was a poor tackle, and I think that he couldn't have had any complaints if the referee had produced a red card.
It just seemed to be he was annoyed, and McMenamin was running rings around him, and he had just come on Robinson. It was just that tackle where he gave a bit extra into it, and he did catch McMenamin on the boot, and I thought it was a red there. He's lucky to got away with that. Just quickly on where those teams are sitting, there seems to be still a bit of talk about Marin. Is there any word what's happening there? Is he likely to still be at the Oval come the end of the transfer window?
I mean, it's pretty clear he's not part of Mick McDermott's plans going forward. I mean, if you're not going to play him, if he's not going to feature, he has to go. Otherwise, it's a waste of a player, and it's a waste of a wage. So I would imagine that he will be moved on before the end of the transfer window. I think it's a matter of finding someone who's prepared to pony up to pay a transfer fee for him. I mean, I don't know how that's gonna pan out, but I don't see him being part of Glentoran's plans or being at the Oval past the 1st of September.
Crews host Portadown next, and the Glens go to the brand new fresh carpet world of Dungannon. Shifting over to Solitude, Cliftonville made life difficult for themselves for a second weekend in a row. But this time they got themselves off the hook. They look flashy going forward against Carrick, but lacking concentration again at the back. We'll start off that they played in front of a sellout home crowd at Solitude. Could this be a trend for the Reds where they are going to be packing that home end week in, week out? Or was it just a case of opening weekend, bit more attention on it?
Well, I think there's a lot of optimism there because of how well they did last season and the viewpoint that they've recruited well in the summer. I mean, I know that their season ticket sales have been phenomenal. You know, the majority of the home stand, as in the cage end, has been sold the season tickets. So they don't need to sell that many more on a weekly basis to actually have a home sellout. So if you're selling it at home to Carrick, well, you're going to sell out at home to the top six. So I think they will sell out most weeks. Maybe, you play Newry on a Tuesday night and maybe it doesn't pan out that way. But I think that most games at Solitude on a weekend are going to be sold out. And that's fantastic. That's what you want. Irish League football is in a good place. We know that the opening weekend crowds were well up on what they've been in previous seasons. It's a really positive thing. And Cliftonville are a big part of that. They're a club with, if they had better facilities or extra another stand there, they could get more fans. There's no doubt about it. They have the potential to be a club that can regularly attract over 2,000 fans, 2,500 fans every week. And that's what we kind of want. You want to see the clubs who at the moment are bringing in between 1,000 and 1,500 to maybe 2,000. You want to see them kick up into the 2,000s, and you want to see Linfield who bring in, let's say, 2,500 maybe. You want to see them kick into the 3,000s. You want to see those crowds go up all over the place rather than just being patting ourselves in the back and celebrating and being satisfied with what we have. We want to see more and more crowds, and I think the only way we're going to realise that potential is with additional funding to build new infrastructure at Irish League grounds. So please, can we release that 36 million? In fact, can we please make it about 55 million to make up for the massive loss of inflation that we've had through inflation since that money was first muted in 2011? If we really want to unleash the potential of the Irish League, we need to improve facilities.
Well, on that note, is that the thing that is holding back a bit more development there at Solitude? I'm not fully in the loop of what their plans are there, but outsiders will look at that ground and go, well, you've got that big white elephant of an old main stand and you've got the big grassy bank behind the dugouts, which for me has always been a bit of a desolate area. That just seems like open potential. Is it just a case of they can't move forward, they can't progress to fill what seems to be an apparent need? They sold out their home end days in advance. Is it just waiting on that funding, or is there some things in the background there where they're like, yeah, this is what we're looking to do next to redevelop the ground?
I mean, I think everybody's waiting for the funding, and Cliftonville are one of those clubs that will be in the mix for it to improve their facilities. It's a strange ground, isn't it? The cage stand is fantastic. The facilities in it are brilliant, but ultimately it is a stand behind the goal. That's not for everyone. The old stand, which I sat in many times over the years, again, you've got this strange thing where the away fans and the home fans are like an entire football pitch away from each other because of the setup of the ground. Yeah, it needs a refresh. I don't think anybody at Solitude or Cliftonville would disagree with that. Again, like I say, there's potential there. And we can see that with the crowds that we're getting, but we can get more fans, not just Cliftonville, all across the league, and we can unleash the Irish League's full potential with a bit of help from our friends in Stormont.
It's truly incredible to see. They're just over 11,000 last weekend, and I remember not too many years ago when it just felt like any ground over four figures was like, wow, particularly if it wasn't the Oval or Windsor. But getting into the game, insert dream start cliche here. Was it like 8 seconds or something that they got the goal from?
7.92, I believe, is the official figure now. It was 9, and then somehow it came down a second and a bit over the course of Saturday. Yeah, what a great goal. Really well worked. Not particularly original. Half of Europe seems to have been doing that goal. Sparta Rotterdam, Bournemouth have both tried it in recent times. It seems to be a bit of a trend. I suspect that particular move will not work this time next week anywhere in Europe. I think it's had its go. It was great and really well executed. What an overhead kick from Hale. Obviously, that goal is not meant to end specifically with an overhead kick. It's supposed to end with the striker running on it and smash it into the net. But he made it his own, so fair play to him. Yeah, it was great. I love stuff like that.
How continental, eh? What I also loved is Paddy McLaughlin was like, yeah, that wasn't my idea. I'm glad it worked, but it's not what I would do. But They were flying so quick. It caught, I think, everybody off guard, even if you listened to it on the radio. It didn't take too long for Carrick to get back in, levelling it. Really made by Curtis Allen on the right-hand side of the box. He hassled the defender, and then he picked out Lloyd Anderson beautifully just outside the 6-yard box. Curtis Allen isn't there to sit back and take a paycheck anyway. He started off really well for Carrick.
Curtis Allen that's a risk of a signing in many ways. That people might find that a controversial statement, but he's going to be on a fair wage that probably by his standards is maybe not as much as he's been on the past. I'm sure it isn't. In fact, for Carrick, that'll be a big outlay, and Curtis has injury problems. Everybody knows that about him. He has quality that is hard to come by if you are Carrick Rangers or a Newry City or a Dungannon Swifts. He has that in abundance, and we saw that on Saturday. He was obviously set up Lloyd Anderson, but I think from what we see from the highlights and what I heard on Radio Ulster, he all round had a good game, and that's what he brings to the table. And Carrick, for me, have made a really good start. Now I know they go on and lose this game, and we have the red card and the penalty, but they lost 3-2, sure, but it doesn't seem like it was a bad performance. That on top of the win over Newry last weekend, and ultimately they're the games that Carrick need to win. You need to beat the teams around you. So great start, I think, for Carrick. And I'm impressed with the fact they came up, they beat Ards in the playoff 2019. And I think most people would have said, sure, they'll come straight back down again. Now, obviously, COVID and no relegation for a year maybe helped that a wee bit, helped them cement their place. They are an established Premiership team now, and I don't see them being in the bottom two this season. So fair play to them.
Feels like it. You're absolutely right. It was a risk. It's one of those things that other fans are quick to jump on and say there is plenty of red flags that you've got to worry about an older player, but they're nailing these at the minute, Carrick, with the likes of Cushley as well. And he got a goal, that beautiful left foot of his on show again, got the goal that got them 2-1 up. And at the break there, Paddy McLaughlin for Cliftonville just must have thought, here we go again.
Yeah, concerning to be 2-1 down. But I mean, I guess that if you're Cliftonville, you probably always have the confidence that you can come back into the game because you've got the firepower and attack, and no surprise that it's Joe Gormley that pops up with the winner. I don't think anybody's really written off Joe Gormley. I mean, I think sometimes you kind of get that vibe from him that he feels that people are writing him off. I don't think that's the case. Sometimes he's maybe not seen as the force that he was, but here he's still the best finisher in the Irish League. He's still a force to be reckoned with. He just scored the sort of goal that Joe Gormley scores. That turns 1 point into 3 points for Cliftonville. He's been doing it for years, and I think he can do it for a few years to come yet anyway. Big moment from a big man.
Undoubtedly, I counted it as 45 seconds this time round from the time he stepped his first boot onto the pitch and until he went up and popped in the goal. That was the one to make it 3-2. They got back into the game on 53 minutes after what I saw. I thought Cliftonville were gifted that penalty. It came from Mark Surgener pulling on Luke Turner. Carrick manager Stuart King, he wasn't happy with it, and this is how he saw the decision when he was speaking to the club's social media team.
First one's not a penalty. It's an overhead cross that's going out of play. Player throws himself to the ground. He tells my player it's not a penalty. The referee gives it. What makes it worse is when I speak to the assessor after the game and he tells me that he agrees it's a penalty, and I show him to it. I show him the footage and he still says it's a penalty. So listen, it's disappointing, but that's football.
Stuart King's not happy. He doesn't think it should be a penalty. Carrick almost got into the game near the very end when Tilney broke through. David Cushley again being the provider. He was one-on-one, charging into the 6-yard box. He slotted it in, but the flag went up. On radio, Gareth Hanna was talking about how he said it was close, and those are just the fine margins which could have decided that game.
It's hard to tell, isn't it, on the TV footage whether Tilney was on or off. You don't quite get that Premier League overview that you get when you're watching Super Sunday. But I mean, listen, I think Stuart King has every right to be annoyed. I mean, the penalty seems harsh. Red card was probably harsh as well. It's frustrating, and sometimes when you are one of those clubs at the bottom of the league, you feel like you don't get the big decisions when you go to the top clubs. Whether that's right or not, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe it's an inevitable consequence of the opposition having more of the ball and getting into the penalty box more often. You're in more danger of conceding penalties and what have you.
If you are, from an outsider point of view, looking at Cliftonville, should Cliftonville be worried it's not the best start to the season, being torn apart a bit by Coleraine, sneaking their way through Carrick? Is there work to be done there after a dogged display in Europe. They're slow to
Yeah, it
start
has
here.
been a relatively slow start. It's only 2 games, so it's difficult to draw any real serious conclusions. I mean, if you look at it one way, it's not particularly surprising what's happened. Coleraine away, that's one of the most difficult games in Irish League football. And at the end of the day, they did actually beat Carrick, so it's maybe a par, really. Yeah, the performances haven't been maybe the level that they would expect, but they've a lot of quality there, so I'm sure they'll improve.
I thought they were pulsating as always, moving forward. Malin really impressed out wide for them and seemed to just push forward and really make things happen for them. They go again. They go to Ballymena for their next game. Meanwhile, Carrick, they welcome that team who Cliftonville struggled against. They welcomed Coleraine to Taylor's Avenue. I saw you Glenavon fans online last week. We can play with 9 men every week. I saw you jest. Well, you're making a good go of it this season. Down to 9 men again. Gary Hamilton isn't happy about it again. And they almost got away with it again. But Larne squeaked their way through with a win thanks to a late penalty. 97th minute. Gutting, I think, is probably the words that Glenavon fans were feeling on Saturday. They almost did it again. What is going on there?
I mean, I wish it was at this game because it looked great crack altogether. Gary Hamilton was not happy after the game, as we can tell from his interviews with the media. Very entertaining all round. I don't think he would see it that way. Serious issues at hand. Obviously, 3 big decisions, and I'm not sure Andrew Davey got them right. So I think Gary Hamilton is right to be angry. I can understand his anger. I think it's fair enough for him to raise it. However, I don't agree with him necessarily that there's some sort of anti-Glenavon conspiracy theory going on, or that the referees are out to stop Glenavon. I think it's just a bit of misfortune on his part that his team were on the wrong end of some poor decisions this weekend. So Gary Hamilton's right in one way, but I wouldn't necessarily agree with him on the anti-Glenavon vibe that he seems to think's going on.
Oh, Keith, I love this so much to discuss and dissect. Where do we go first? Let's talk about the goals, shall we? Paul O'Neill, he's off the mark for his new club, Larne. Peppy wee run, I thought, right into the far end of the box. I'm not quite sure if the Glenavon keeper should have really run out and rushed out to try and close him down, but O'Neill's shot, he shot it early and he found the back of the net. Glenavon then got a goal back, wing back Micheál Glynn. He got it just before half time. It was he won a header at the back post. It was actually brilliantly pulled back by Jack Malone on the byline. That's really Jack Malone's goal, if anybody made that. And, well, let's get down to the decisions. First one is red card for Callum Burney. I'll set the scene. It's very clear that he tripped Lee Bonus as he ran on towards the box. There was defenders in line with him at the time, left and right of Burney. But Andrew Davey blows it up. And as he blows it up, the ball trickles through from this tackle towards an on-rushing Paul O'Neill, who scores. Larne players are furious. Glenavon players are looking around going, what's going to happen here? And the referee, Andrew Davey, gives a red card to Callum Burney with the idea that it was a last man tackle. In your eyes, before we get into the whole should he have stopped the play as it was going on, should he have let it develop, if there's no Paul O'Neill in that situation, is that a red card for last man?
I suppose the phraseology is he denying a clear goal scoring opportunity? Yeah, I mean, arguably it's a very cynical tackle. Like, it's very obvious what he's doing. He knows he's in trouble and he brings him down. So I think there's a strong case for a red card. I would argue that there's maybe enough Glenavon defenders around him to maybe get in and make a tackle, make a stop to prevent the goal scoring opportunities. So it's harsh, but I think the reality of it is the referee should have played advantage. He didn't play advantage. The ball ends up in the back of the net. He can't give that goal because he very clearly blew the whistle before the ball hit the net. And he's like, oh no, I've made a mistake here. I've denied Larne scoring a goal. How can I best make up for this? Maybe this isn't Andrew Davies' thought process, but this is just my interpretation of what happened. And I guess a way to like level it up or even it out would be to give that red card And that was kind of an orange card. That was maybe one that could go on either way. But when everything else that unfurled after that, then I think he got the red card out because he knew that he got it wrong. I mean, what really should have happened there is play should have continued, advantage should have been played, ball goes into the back of the net, it's a goal for Larne and a yellow card, and we get on with the game. And if that happened, I don't think nobody would complain about the yellow card, nobody would be looking at that to be a red, and Larne would be happy to have their goal. So I think it was, I can understand why Gary Hamilton was annoyed.
Gary Hamilton suggested that Andrew Davey admitted there and then that he'd realised he had made a mistake, and I think he probably did. In my head, it's definitely a red card for last man. I think he's through, regardless of defenders either side. They're all in line. He bonuses through at that point. There's another red card to talk about, as we alluded to earlier. Jack Malone, the man who I believe provided the ball for their goal. It's a 50-50 in the middle of the park. Big sliding tackle from both players. For me, I think he caught Paul O'Neill with a high boot. It went above in his chest. It felt reckless to me. Do you disagree, Keith?
No, not particularly. I mean, the way the camera angle doesn't show it quite clearly because of the way that Malone's back is, and it's difficult enough to tell. I think Andrew Davey has a very good view of it. I'm happy to trust his judgment on it. He jumped into a tackle that he didn't need to, so I think there's always the potential for a red card in that situation. I don't really have a lot of sympathy for players that get red cards when they jump into tackles like that. Again, it's not maybe an absolute clear-cut decision, an easy decision for the referee, but I think, probably got that one right.
I think when you're there and it's live and it's right in front of you, I can see it being given, particularly with the nature of it. And then there was the final twist in the tail, because it was 1-1 at that point. The Paul O'Neill goal wasn't given from the Callum Burney red card. So Glenavon have held on, and then it's a late penalty. It's for a handball. It's hard to tell. I think it's a big decision to give it, I must say. I think it's a big decision when you see that flick up onto the hand to go, right, I think that's a handball, I'm going to give it. Tiernan Lynch would have been frustrated if he didn't give it. Is there a question over it?
It flicks up very close to him. Do you really have time to react? Is his hand in an unnatural position? Not really sure it is. I think it's really harsh. I suppose from a referee's perspective, they've got to take out the time factor. When we look at these things, sometimes we'll say something like, that's a crazy decision to give in the 96th minute. Well, it doesn't actually matter that it's the 96th minute. You've got to judge it on its merits. And you know what? We see those sort of penalties given all the time, so it's not really a surprise. And probably with what Andrew Davey and the other officials, what they talk about and the guidance that they get, it probably is a penalty. Do I like that it's a penalty? Not particularly. I find that sort of thing frustrating.
Gutting, as I said earlier on, that's probably how Glenavon feel. But oh my goodness, imagine being a Glenavon fan. Just your heart must be going through the ringer. But ultimately, after 2 games, they're sitting there with 1 point, and the final bit that Gary Hamilton talked about was, you talked about it there, an agenda, I guess, is the word that he didn't use, but I am. He's suggesting that it just seems to constantly happen to Glenavon. I've been there to see a lot of these red cards being given.
There's maybe a discipline issue there as well. I mean, see the Owen Bradley red card last weekend was just, that's just poor from someone of his experience. So it does seem to be a discipline issue there. They haven't just got 4 red cards out of nothing. It's an interesting year for Glenavon, and I'd actually put Ballymena into this category as well. That Glenavon and Ballymena are 2 really big clubs. For fan bases that demand a lot, potential there for there to get good crowds as it is, but both have potential to get bigger crowds. But they're a little bit unfortunate in the sense that other clubs around them, Larne, a prime example, massive financial investment there. Same at Glentoran. Coleraine are in great shape with Oran Kearney. The teams that maybe 5 years ago or a wee bit before they would have been on a level with are quite often better than, certainly better than Larne, have surpassed them. And it's not really any of their fault. They're living within their means, and they've got this. What do you do if you're Glenavon or Ballymena? Do you invest more money to try and maybe go full-time or to just bring in better part-time players, well, that's a hell of a risk, because if you don't make European football, as you're likely not to, then you could end up, losing money and putting the club in a difficult position. And both Glenavon and Ballymena in their history have been in difficult financial positions. So that's a concern for them. So they realistically have got to keep doing what they do and live within their means and do the best that they can within those means. But sadly for them, I think it's almost impossible for the two of them to break the top six, or very, very difficult for them to break the top six. You kind of got to hope to get that seventh place and then maybe a bit of luck and win the European playoff, or a bit of luck and you win a cup, which is something that obviously both clubs have won cup competitions in the last 5 years and have had a lot of joy doing that. But in terms of league progress, Glenavon and Ballymena, they are too good to ever get into a relegation battle, but they're not quite good enough to feature in the leagues, the upper echelons. You hope they can maybe squeeze top six, but for that to happen, somebody in the top six has to have a total stinker. And I don't see it happening.
I think you've really nailed something I've been thinking about, and probably something that people running those clubs have been thinking about. It's, what do you do? Because if you stand still, you're going backwards. But how do you commit in this new world of transfer fees? It feels like last year Glenavon rolled the dice. They brought in experience, quality players in the likes of Waterworth and Hockey and Stafford, and on the whole that didn't work, but it was clearly a roll of the dice to give it a go. And Ballymena's doing something similar, bringing in Davy McDade and other players. And are you sacrificing your future? I think Crusaders are an interesting team in this regard, where they need to push on, because if they don't push on, their base could just fizzle away out until all of a sudden you are trying to crawl back into that top area, and it could be tough. It's all about player development, I guess. It's just getting those players in and hoping it all comes together for them. And
if I'm being honest, I respect more what Glenavon and Ballymena are trying to do, where they're trying to live within their means and just be what they can be. And those two teams both spend decent money. I don't want to make out like there's no budget. That's clearly not the case, but they're not spending the same level as a Larne, for example. You mentioned Crusaders. Obviously, they've got that takeover pending. I have concerns about that. I don't know really whether that's the best way forward, selling off your club to get investment so you can spend money on players. That's a really big risk. I would rather fall back down the league table. I'd rather be a bottom six club than give away large portions of my club to investors that haven't grown up with the club and don't have it in their background. I think that's a risky move. And, Glentoran have done something similar. As you know, I'm an Ards fan, and we'll talk a wee bit about Ards in a bit, but I come from a club where the ground was sold and it's had absolutely catastrophic consequences for the club that go forward for 20 years on, 25 years on. So I'm very wary of outward investment and selling off your ground, stuff like that. That's scary biscuits to me, even if that means you're not challenging for the Irish Cup or the Irish League title, because there's more important things in football than winning trophies.
You've hit on a really interesting point, and I would just love to explore it one bit more, because we've got full-time clubs in this league, and plenty of people pointed to the erratic nature that the League of Ireland has been over the past 10, 15 years, where full-time football has just been a strange mix of clubs rising and falling and exploding with success and then fizzling out. And I think more clear than ever before, I see how this Linfield story is what these investors were looking at, that you win the league and then that could access you somewhat easier than before a big pot of money in the Europa Conference League. We're not seeing it yet, but it feels like these clubs they're bringing some new players to the league, but they're hiking the prices up for players that would be about in the league anyway. That's good for players. That's good for any type of progression. But is there a certain fear of there's a warning from the likes of Cork? Very different situation, as well as Fingal and all that type of stuff. Those teams there. Are we playing with fire with some of these teams at the minute? Or is it being done in a different way where fans shouldn't get too worried?
I think it's massively worrying. I would be concerned about it. The wages that some Irish League players are earning now are massive, and we're doing this thing at the moment where everyone's really excited about the Irish League. I have never known there to be such positivity around it in my 30 years following it, and it's really good, but we need to be careful not to get carried away with it and clubs don't overspend, because there's going to be a thing here where if Linfield qualify for the Europa Conference League, I think they will, That's going to open up a pot of money, which we believe will be around £3 million. That's massive. So then Linfield will inevitably invest that in players, and rightly so. Well, then what do other clubs do? What do Glentoran and Crusaders do there? Do they spend more money to try and chase that? If they do, that's really scary and really risky. There's this notion that if Linfield qualify for the Europa Conference League, that's great news for the entire league. I'm not convinced about that. It could go one way and Linfield could dominate for the next 10 years, or it could go another way where clubs try and chase them and spend too much money to try and catch up with them, and then we end up with financial meltdowns. So listen, obviously, I do want Linfield to make and to win on Thursday night. It would be good, a positive thing for a lot of reasons, but other clubs need to tread carefully. And we see a thing as well where there's different levels opening up. I mentioned Glenavon and Ballymena are a step below now the top six. Then you go a step below Glenavon and Ballymena, and you've got a bottom four there. It's difficult for them because they're training 2 nights a week, while other teams are either full-time or training 3 nights a week. And you ask those players to train 2 nights a week or to train an extra night a week, 3 nights a week, and then they can quite rightly turn around and say, well, I'm not getting that much money. It's not really worth my while to do this. Then you get the situation that we had last year. I mean, there was a stat yesterday that Carrick didn't beat any of the top 6 in their 18 games against them. Like, that's quite concerning. And those stats are repeated across the league. It's very, very rare that one of Carrick, Dungannon, or Portadown, I know it has happened, but it's very rare that one of those 3 teams go and beats one of the top 6. And that's concerning as well. So I think the input of money into the league, it's good. You know, we're seeing some great players, we're seeing great football, but we need to be careful with it because it's creating levels, and teams need to live within those levels, as depressing or as difficult as that might be. And that applies to the Glentoran as much as it applies to Carrick.
An amazing insight there, Keith. I do think it's a thing that hasn't been fully looked at just yet or prognosticated about of where does this go and where does this end. Right now, look, it's creating, great games on the pitch. And let's talk about Linfield. Let's go to that game that happened on Sunday. It was another stroll in the park for Linfield down at the showgrounds. They rotated the squad, unsurprisingly, and I don't really think they got out of second gear at all. Newry were dogged and they were fighting. Linfield almost let them run onto them and chase these balls down, but the efficiency of how Linfield put Newry to the sword was very impressive.
Do you know what? I thought Newry did all right. To be fair to them, they kept it competitive for, 60 minutes, 70 minutes. Big gap in standard between those two clubs, as we've just talked about. But all round, I think that was a really good day for Newry City as a football club. 2 and a bit thousand there, over 2,000 fans there. Clearly, it wasn't 2,000 Linfield fans. I mean, there was a massive crowd in the home end. And you look round and you kind of see GAA shirts and stuff. So that maybe makes me think there are people who don't necessarily go and watch, not because they weren't GAA, just they weren't wearing Newry kits necessarily. So that makes me think there are people who don't necessarily go and watch Newry every week, have came along to see that game because it's on a Sunday, because it's Linfield, and I'm sure they enjoyed the product, and they may well come back. So, and Newry gave a good account of themselves. They were dogged, and Linfield rightly won, deservedly won, no doubt about it. Probably should have had about 6 penalties for some strange calls in that game as well. But Newry did not let themselves down in any way, and I think it was a really and the showgrounds looked good on TV. And I think it was a good day for Newry. As for Linfield, I think they would like to have killed that game off a little bit earlier. It was 2-1 going well into the second half. Bear in mind how they've arguably one of the biggest games in their history coming up on Thursday night. I think that Linfield would like to have been 3-0 up at half time or maybe early in the second half. They had to bring Chris Shields on to shore things up. So I don't think that went exactly to plan for Linfield, but here they looked very good. And I will be absolutely amazed if Linfield don't win the league this season.
I'm starting to feel that way as well. Feels like that's a game where you've travelled to Latvia, you've come back, you've got a Newry City team that's full of players that are just running at you, firing bodies forward, and they didn't do that much to score the goals. I don't know what Vertanen did, bar stick the ball in the net. His second goal was well taken, but he was at fault, I felt, in defending the goal that Newry got with Lorcan forward. And this Kirk Miller looks fantastic, and what a signing bringing back Joel Cooper is. He just on the wing, that cross for the third goal, tantalising. Like, they've got real strength and depth here.
Cooper's class act, isn't he? You know, he's just fun to watch. I love the cheeky wee cross for the first goal as well. That was just class. Vertailen's fun. He just seems to score goals without necessarily being a great all-round player. But so yeah, Linfield are in great shape. You know, that they're good all over the pitch. I think the biggest problem they're going to face is if they qualify for the Conference League, which is a fairly big if. You know, our RFS are no mugs. How do they handle the Thursday, Sunday thing? Obviously, they're handling it at the moment. That's fine now. It's going to be a bit more difficult when you get into the season and you've got a lot of games going on. That's their biggest challenge this year, and you can't really talk about that until after Thursday night. So if they go out on Thursday, I have absolutely no doubt they'll win the league. If they stay in, I still think they'll win it because actually, you know, they could probably handle it because they, as you said, they've got the squad depth.
They really do. I'm constantly raving about Devine, and if that's your not even nailed on starter, just the size and the presence of him, you know, brilliant. Even that back line. I'm trying to pick my fantasy team here week to week, and I'm like, who's going to be this back line player for Linfield? I really want, because I thought that it was at least a place where I'm like, well, I'm guaranteed to have somebody there that I can bank on every week. But Newry looked great going forward. McGovern was a threat. Lorcan Ford is just going to spook a few fullbacks this season. But let's look ahead to the game this Thursday, the Europa Conference League second leg of the final qualifying game. Latvian opposition, RFS. Riga's Football Scola was a away man like me has butchered the pronunciation of it. 2-0 ahead in Riga. They must have been on dreamland. There were two great goals. How disappointed must they be knowing that they're going into this Windsor Park game and it's 0-0 again. It's a dead rubber.
It was a big blow in the sense that obviously, you know, they've given away a lead, but you look at it one way and you say, well, would Linfield have taken a draw before kickoff in Latvia? Of course they would have. That's a good result. That is unquestionably a good result on its own. The factor, though, is there a psychological element to it? Is there an element of this has changed the whole tie and made it winnable now for RFS? Because not just because they've got the draw, so it's 0-0 to kick off with, but actually have those two goals in injury time given them a lift, and they're like, we can go on. And does it put doubt in Linfield's mind, and does it scare Linfield? And I think that if David Haley can get the players to the point where they put that completely out of their minds and they're focused solely on the game ahead, and like you say, it starts off all level, Linfield will win that game because I think they are marginally better than RFS. I think they showed that in the 90 minutes that preceded the two goals. There's a psychological element to football, and there's no doubt that those two late goals will have given RFS a lift. Big old game. I'm sure David Haley's cursing that the away goal rule's been scrapped because that would have been a much better result 2 seasons ago. I'm not sure if you're old enough to remember this. I just about am, but Linfield once beat Copenhagen 3-0 at Windsor Park and then lost 4-0 away with a very, very late goal. Shades of Copenhagen out in Riga. Unlike with that famous Copenhagen result that denied Linfield the chance to play AC Milan back in 93, Linfield have a chance to put this right at Windsor Park, and I think they will, but it's going to be tight. It wouldn't hugely surprise me if we saw extra time penalties on Thursday night. It is one of the biggest games in Linfield's history, and that's a hell of a statement when you think what the history of Linfield Football Club have.
It really is. It feels like a completely new generation. Like you look how the Irish League has changed. I was talking with Michael Clark about how it's 15 years since we went back down to 12 and seeing these full-time clubs and all the rest. And we looked down to the League of Ireland and saw Shamrock Rovers first getting into the Europa League group stage and then Dundalk repeating it again. And I just felt like a pipe dream. But I think Linfield will be massively deflated if they don't get through on Thursday. The Latvian league is a league, I think, of similar ilk. Again, I'm not saying they should run over RFS, but we are not talking about the previous teams have played against, Zurich or Bodo Glimt. You know, this is a league who we should feel as though we can beat on our day, and they'll need to be up for it, and nerves could play a part. A lot of hype over these big men, and you're absolutely right. A corner swinging in, it'll just be about attention to details there. Absolutely massive game. I of course I can't call it, but I think the atmosphere is going to be incredible. I would absolutely put the ribbon around it. I think this is the biggest game in Linfield's history, and I think it shows that winning the league is bigger than ever before, because all you need to do is get through one round in the Champions League against hopefully a TNS or someone of that ilk, and you can lose two-legged ties and you still are in with a shout of getting a massive windfall. A very exciting game on the way. We'll go to Shamrock Park, a game I was covering, and a game between two teams who invested heavily bringing new players into the squad, and I think it's fair to say one team showed the other how to seamlessly integrate lots of players into their starting 11. It does help when you have players of the quality that Coleraine have. It was the McDermott, the Shevlin show. Coleraine looking very impressive once again.
Yeah, Coleraine are really good, and not enough people are talking about them, frankly. There was definitely more talk pre-season. Everyone knows what Linfield are. That's fine. But there was more talk pre-season about, could the Glens make a push for league title? Could Cliftonville in particular, could they push for league title? Coleraine are on a par, if not better than those two, in my opinion. I think the signings that they made in the summer were first class. Oran Kearney has not turned into a lesser manager overnight. We know how good he has been in the past. I think Coleraine have a real, like I say, Linfield are going to win the league, but Coleraine have a real chance this season of second or winning an Irish Cup or winning the League Cup. I think they look really impressive on paper, and they were impressive on the pitch. You know, the McDermott Shevlin link-up play was superb. Scored two, and Shevlin probably should have scored a third, one in between, which also came from a good bit of play by McDermott. But if you report it down, you'd be worried. I mean, I don't really understand some of the moves in the summer. You know, why would you let Greg Hall and Michael Ruddy go? I mean, they're two pretty solid fullbacks who very rarely let Portadown down. They brought players in that maybe some of them I don't know an awful lot about, if I'm being bluntly honest. Most people are tipping Portadown for relegation. And I think that's fair. And I haven't seen anything in the last two games to dissuade me from that opinion.
It absolutely is fair. I'd say they've had two tough games, absolutely. Linfield away and taking on this new Coleraine. I don't think anybody would want that. They came off what fans would talk about as a historically poor season. They almost got relegated by what would be seen as the minnows down the road. That was a massive game for Anna United and came very close. And clearly that squad needed a completely uprooting and upheaval there. If reports are to be believed, this is not a team that's been formed by Paul Doolan. It seems to have been formed by either a committee or a head of recruitment. And Paul Doolan's talked about how they just can't get Irish League players in. They're looking for players and they're being quoted 20, 30, 50,000 pounds for somebody. And they're finding it tough up top. Both games have shown that. Again, they're going against tough opposition. But the one thing that fans seem to be asking for was Premiership quality players, and they've brought in players who most have never played in the league. Now, do they work out on some occasions? Yes. I would say if you said to a Portadown fan, the likes of Kevin Braniff and Gary McCutcheon, they were not regulars massively in the league before they came in. So it's worked before, and Doolan's talked about how in interviews that these players are a bunch of strangers and they don't really know each other yet. Some Portadown fans would say, well, isn't that what pre-season's for? So a lot of work needs to be done. The one hope I would say if I was a Portadown fan is that it's a young team so that it can grow into it. And as much as there's a couple of years since those big achievements, Paul Doolan has a brilliant record as a coach. He did amazing things with Drogheda well over a decade ago. And, you know, he was the manager or head coach of a Republic of Ireland underage team that provided some great players. And by all accounts, players like Paddock Manali have raved about what Doolan's brought. They're probably lacking in confidence. And it's going to be a tough season for them. They stayed up because they were able to beat Warrenpoint more than Warrenpoint were able to beat them. And they got good results against Coleraine and Ballymena and got a number of draws. It's that whole thing. I don't know if there's a real name for it, where you counter what happened the last season against this season. You're like, okay, so that's 3 points dropped, let's say, because they beat Coleraine at home last season. Do the Ports look at that and go, there's 3 points dropped? What do we do? It's going to be tough, but they are growing into the season. For Coleraine, I completely agree with everything that you said. You take their back four, their midfield, what they've got up top, they are equal, if not better, than some of the other teams you're saying there. Why did Larne let go Lee Lynch? He is just a dynamo in midfield. Jimmy Glacken, I know he's been there for a bit, ran the show up top. And the one thing is that they are a busy team, they're a frenetic team, and it'll just be about, can they sustain that amount of energy every week? I guess that's why you have the likes of Conor McHenry and James McLaughlin and Michael McCrudden on the bench to freshen things up. But could they run themselves into the ground? A bit like Linfield and Newry, I don't think Coleraine had to do much. But what they did do, they did it with efficiency and class. And Matthew Shevlin, based on that performance against a poor Portdown team so far, he could be scary with the amount of goals he got, because he took them so well. A poacher with strength. He looked amazing at Shamrock Park there. A team with an unwanted record is Dungannon. That's 7 wins out of 7 for David Jeffrey's Ballymena United against Dungannon. It's like the mirror world of their Carrick. They can beat Dungannon, but they can't beat Carrick. Ross Redmond was benched after that last-minute poor back pass. David Jeffrey was angry, and clearly he decided to make a statement with that. Ballymena ran out 2-0 winners. A disappointing start to life with the brand new surface at Stangmore Park for Dean Shields. The goals, well, I thought David McDade's backheel pass was just beautiful. Josh Kelly ran onto it, and I'm surprised he didn't square it to Paul McElroy, who was just to the left of him. But he took it, and he hit it true, and he scored. And Swift's boss, Dean Shields, is crying about players going forward. I guess they couldn't get Darren McBrien back soon enough.
That's it for Dungannon. I mean, I talked a little bit about clubs need to live within their means, and Dungannon do that well. And, you know, they will again be in the bottom four. Again, they will probably have a relegation battle up until a certain point in about, let's say, March, where they'll win a few games in a row, pull away from it, and then they'll be fine, because that's kind of what happens everywhere for Dungannon. And I don't see that changing.
Yeah, it could be tough, but they found form in fits and starts last season. They do have plenty of new names, like of Ruddy and Cole, and maybe it's just a case of Crusaders was tough. They haven't had a good record against Ballymena. They just need to get up and running and see what they can do. A win that Ballymena wanted to get, no doubt, but they now have to face a Cliftonville side. I think that's going to be a very tasty game at the showgrounds. How lucky am I that the week that Ards announce some brilliant news for them in regards to their ground, I have Mr. Ards, Keith Bailie, on the pod. Keith, this is massive news, I imagine, for your club. What are the details? What did that announcement mean last week?
It's really good news. It's something that's been coming a long time. It's been over a year in the works. I'll take it back, I guess, just to explain to people, because maybe not everybody has a full knowledge of it. Ards played at Castlereagh Park for the best part of well over 80 years, I think. That ground was sold in the late 90s because the club was in crippling debt, and you can think about that and why I say things I do about maybe Crusaders or Glentoran when I urge caution when it comes to financial management. The club sold its ground. They left it in late 2001. Since then, they've played mainly at Bangor, 2 different spells Bangor, but they also had stints at Ballyclare and at Carrick Rangers and at Solitude as well, a very brief spell at Solitude. And throughout that time, there have been 5-6 attempts to bring Ards home, to coin a phrase. One of the very early ones involved a dog track, something similar to what Distillery have. That fell through. There's an attempt to move into Villa High School, and you'd have a pitch that could be accessed by the school, and that could also be used as an Irish League ground. That fell through. There was a community stadium that was going to be built at Londonderry Park, which is playing fields in Newton Ards in partnership with the council. That fell through when it was discovered that the land wasn't actually owned by the council. It was owned by a local landlord. So unbelievable, crazy setbacks, heartbreaking situations down the years. I think sometimes people who don't really follow it get the impression that Ards have never really tried to get a ground back in Newton Ards. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's been 20 years of setbacks and heartbreak, and it's an incredibly difficult and emotional thing for those people who are involved in it. And it's really difficult, actually, because people will make jibes about it, and people will kind of crack jokes about it. And it's quite a painful thing and quite a sensitive thing for people who have been there and been involved the whole way through, and for fans of the club. So what does this mean, and what is it? So what's happened here is there is a plot of land called the Floodgates. It's along the Portaferry Road. It's near the airport. It's a couple of 100 yards along the road from where Castlereagh Park used to stand. It's council owned, and it's basically a wasteland at the moment. There's nothing on it in particular, and the council have leased it to Ards. It's a long-term loan, I believe around the 25-year mark, and it's at a reasonable rate that's affordable for Ards. So it's not free, but it's not a £1 for 99 years job, but it's at a reasonable rate that the club can afford. And what it does is it gives Ards the opportunity to try and build a ground of their own. Now, if you logged on the Ards social media, you would have seen like the big kind of flagged up, Ards are coming home. Yeah, maybe, hopefully. But there's also a really, really long way to go. So the ground that Ards have planned, and you can see plans of it, it's available. So out there on the internet. It's not spectacular by any shade of the imagination. It's probably like a modern Dungannon or a modern Warren Point. It's 2,000 capacity in total. Seating is under the 1,000 mark. Two relatively small but modern stands. It's nothing spectacular, but that alone would cost 4 million to make, to build. And this is the thing that people talk about, the 36 million and how key it is. That 36 million will not do an awful lot for Irish League football because of the expense and the cost of building and where it's at nowadays. So you're talking to build a Stagmore Park that is a little bit more modern than what Dungannon's is now. It sets you back 4 mil. So think about that, and think about what all the various clubs want to do in their plans and how fantastic they are and what they'd actually cost. But anyway, to get back to Ards need to raise 4 million. Obviously, they want to tap into the funds that hopefully will become available from the Department for Communities. Again, no guarantee that they'll get them. They certainly won't get 4 million. I'd be delighted if they did, but I mean, I would imagine it would be spread more thinly than that. I do think Ards should be considered very seriously. In fact, should be at the top of that queue, because if you look at, and I don't want to be disrespectful to other clubs because I know those other clubs need that money as well, and I referenced that at the top of the show when I talked about Cliftonville. But there is nowhere in Northern Ireland where that money would have a bigger impact than it would in Newton Ards. It would be transformational. Because if you take another club, I don't want to pick a club because it doesn't seem like I'm picking on anyone. But if you took another Premiership club or Championship club, they desperately need work done to their ground, sure. But at least they have a ground. There is already a stand there. There is already terracing there. There is a pitch where the team can play on. And there is, in the case of teams that have 3G pitch, there is pitch there that can be accessed by their youth teams, by the community. That does not exist in Newton Ards. There is not a football ground, a ground in Newton Ards where you can watch a sporting event sitting down, right? Not unless you bring your own deck chair, right? You cannot watch a game sitting down in a grandstand anywhere in Newton Ards. Newton Ards is one of the biggest towns in Northern Ireland. Like, this is a proper working class unionist town with a great sporting tradition and a great football tradition, and I love the football. And it just doesn't have any facilities that are worth talking about. And it's transformational for the club, obviously, but also for the area. And I personally believe, and you can say that I'm biased, and you're right, I am, but I think Ards should be at the top of the queue for that funding. Will Ards get that funding? Will anybody get that funding? And if so, when? Who knows? I have no answers to those questions, and neither does the Department for Communities. Difficult situation. So when you see the phrase Ards are coming home, actually, it could be a long way away from that. Now, Ards are not totally reliant on that department. I keep on calling it decal funding because it was decal funding for so long, but it's DFC now. They have plans to look at other areas, other types of funding that could be made available, and also a sort of a raising of funds. I don't want to say crowdfunding because that makes it sound like they're trying to launch a new book or make a small art film. horror film for the. It's obviously it's massive money, and a club that has 100 season ticket holders and gets 300 at a game on a Friday night is not going to be able to raise 4 million. But there will be an element of crowdfunding, for want of a better phrase. It's going to be a massive effort, but Ards are trying their best to access this funding, and if they can do it, if they can make the stream become reality, it is game changing. It will change the lives of people in the town. It will change the level that the club can attain on the pitch. But like I said earlier, it's not really about making ours more successful as a team. I honestly don't really care about that. Ideally, I want us to be in the Premiership. That's better for me. That's better for the club, right? What's more important is actually having the ground of your own, home of your own, so you can build community and you can build a sense of belonging. And you can hear this time and time again that Irish League clubs are vital to their community. They have become community hubs. Even if you want to go back decades, that those clubs were focal points during the dark days of the Troubles, and they helped people in that period by providing entertainment through our darkest days. Ards were one of them clubs. They were there, one of the best teams in the 70s, 4 trophies in 74, competed in Europe. They did all that. But in the last 20 years, they have lost that community sense. Now, they still get decent crowds. There's 300 on Friday night to watch them get beat 5-0 by Loughgall. Amazing that there's 300 Ards fans at the game on Friday night when they haven't played in Newton Ards in 20 years. That gives you a sense of how big that club can be. But all that stuff that if you're a Portadown fan or you're a Coleraine fan or you're a Ballymena fan or you're a Glenavon fan that you take for granted, you're meeting your friends at the game and you going for a pint in the club afterwards and setting off from your ground to go to an away game. None of that stuff exists for ours, and it makes it incredibly difficult. And then talk about sources of income, all that stuff, like advertising around the ground and food at matches and all that stuff. None of that exists for ours. I don't think it's quite appreciated in Irish League circles just how difficult it is. It is a kind of minor miracle that Ards still exist and are actually relatively competitive. They haven't. They're all right. It's a hard argument to make just off the back of a 5-0 defeat to Loughgall, but they have kind of held their own. It would have been very easy for them to disappear and end up falling out of league football or something. They haven't done that, and I think it's to their credit.
Wow, an incredibly impressive telling of the tale. I've just stroked out question after question as you hit all the points.
I rambled.
There's so much there. You hit on it so much. I'm sure the club will have a big sign saying, when they're asking for the funding, we haven't got any for 20 years. And you hit on the fact that, especially for a lot of younger fans, even for someone of my generation, that Ards was an established Premiership top level team, and the fact that they can get that many fans out to games shows there is a community, even despite this nomadic nature that you've lived in. And I'm sure for a long time you've thought this is never going to get resolved. I just have to ask, because I think it'll be a question a lot of people's heads. I know it's ancient history, but when the ground was sold, was there an assumption that a new ground was only a year or two away, or was it we're booted out, we had to sell it and fling up the sail and see where the wind blows?
Yeah, listen, I was in primary school when all that happened, so it's a strange thing. And today, in the age of the internet and being able to organise things a little bit easier, I wonder would it have happened. I think if the situation came about now, we've more awareness about how valuable ground is, both literally and kind of in a community sense. I suspect it wouldn't have happened. I think it wouldn't have been allowed to happen. But it was a different era, and the club, and again, I was really young when this happened, so if I don't get all the details right, please forgive me, but the board of directors at the time went to the shareholders and said, listen, if we don't sell this ground, the club's going to fold. And the shareholders voted in favour of it. I don't think by a massive majority either, and that was it. It was done. And then the directors left, and a new board came in, and then they left another board. And it's been really the same board, to be fair, for about 20 years. Now, the faces have changed, but it's been a continuous thing. And they've done an incredible job in keeping the club afloat. But what happened back then, it just never should have happened. And it's a funny thing. Newry had this heartbreak of going bust, but they folded, and so did Coleraine. This is forgotten, but Coleraine went bust and reformed as another club and kept their position in the league. And you kind of look at that and go, Ards didn't do that. The Ards sold their ground because they wanted to keep the club afloat. Whereas, in retrospect, you would probably rather lose the club and keep the ground. But that was never actually an option for Ards because Ards owned the ground. So because they owned that, whereas Corian didn't own the showgrounds and Newry didn't own their showgrounds. So when those clubs folded, the ground was not part of the debt, was not sold off to pay the debt. Whereas if Ards had folded at that time, they would have lost the ground anyway. So that was the theory. It's better to sell the ground to developers, keep that money, that'll pay the debt, and then use some of that money to try and build a new ground. But there's by the time the debt was paid, there was nothing left, and the club was just plunged into an extraordinary situation that I wouldn't wish upon anyone. There's a handful of clubs around the world. Shamrock Rovers would be one, Wimbledon would be another, that get this, that would understand that have been through a similar thing, Brighton, Hove and Albion. But I actually look at those clubs with a bit of hope because Shamrock Rovers are what a team they are now. They didn't play at Tala for 30 years, longer than that. I don't like to call them AFC Wimbledon, they're just Wimbledon to me, not those other imposters. They're back at Plough Lane. They left Plough Lane in the late 80s. They only just got back now. Brighton and Hove Albion, look where they are. They just stuff Man United, but they were playing at this absolutely dreadful athletics ground that looked like Murray Peters Stadium with
and had
a football pitch in the middle. Yeah. I mean, after they lost the goal zone, so it can happen. Teams can come back from it, and my hope is that Ards have become one of those success stories, because they've sure fought hard enough for it.
It's an incredible story. I guess there's no news on the timeline. It will just be when it comes. It's just it's the first part of the journey.
Listen, if you told me that Ards would be guaranteed to have a ground in 2030, I would bite your hand off for it. I will wait as long as it takes. I hope it happens before then. The club would really like to be back for 2025. Okay. I think that's massively ambitious, personally. But 2025 is the 125th anniversary of the club, and they would like to be back for that. That's the aim. I think it's ambitious, but it's at least they're alive and kicking and fighting for it.
Well, let's go to modern day Ards and the team. You had the Championship Corner on the Social Club. I am delving into some Championship cabaret, and no better man to help guide me through the weekend's results very, very quickly. Were you at the game against Loughgall where Ards lost 5-0? I
missed the Villagers in Bangor to see the Villagers in Bangor.
Fantastic. I forgot about that. Well, I'm glad you missed it. Loughgall, that's two very impressive wins, particularly against Warrenpoint. Well, after this week's games, maybe it wasn't as impressive, but 2 for 2 for Loughgall. They ended the season last year very strongly. Are they dark horses in this league?
They're not dark horses, they're favourites in my book. Now, favourites, funny, people chuck the phrase favourites about, right? Like it doesn't mean anything. Like you can just personally decide who the favourites are. The favourites is an actual thing, and it's who the bookmakers think are favourites. That's who the favourite is. Anyway, there's a funny thing at the start of the season. There was a launch for the league, and nearly everybody I interviewed said the phrase, well, everyone's saying Warrenpoint are favourites. I don't know anybody who actually said Warrenpoint are favourites, but almost naturally, by way of them being relegated, they do become favourites. And to be fair to Barry Gray, he held on to most of his key players, so it wasn't an unreasonable assertion that they would be favourites. I certainly kind of went along with that. And ours are poor, right? But Loughgall are sensational. The way those goals are created, how good they were from set pieces, how they moved the ball, how they moved Ards all over the place. Alex Moore, the Ards goalkeeper, was named man of the match because he made 6 or 7 really impressive saves. That's how dominant Loughgall were. And they've already beat Warrenpoint. I think they've a great chance of winning the league, and they can come up. They've got the facilities there. I would say that they maybe need to ground share at Dungannon or something like that first, and then improve the ground as they went on. But I think that you could be in the not too distant future. You could be going to Premiership games in Loughgall, which why not? It would be a great thing. They been in the Premiership before, held their own for a few years. Then under Niall Curry won the first division a couple more times and couldn't come up, which was really frustrating, I think, for their fans. But they look really good. Pablo Andrade at right wing back was really impressive from the video. Nidus Makalitis, I'm never quite sure if I'm saying that right or not, but he was involved in every goal practically, and he just looked sensational. So They look a really good team. Ben Murdoch, centre back, one of the best centre back in the championship in my book. So I think they've got a great chance. Not
Ferris
real
up
one
top.
point out. Off a Ferris, yeah, take your pick of the two of them.
Yeah.
And there's Andrew Hoey as well, who's small but like really just never gives in, top player. Yeah, they're a good team. Listen, I wouldn't rule Warren Point out yet, just off the back of 2 defeats. There's a long way to go, and they did have 2 difficult games to begin with. Dundela are good. They have a young lad up front called Reece Annett, who's just superb. He's like Michael Owen. He's so quick, gets in behind defences.
He's nippy. He is.
Dundela use him really intelligently. They use him off the bench quite a lot. In some ways, that seems a waste, but he's really good at picking up, old, slow championship defences in the second half. He's destined for a bigger club, I would imagine, with no disrespect to Dundela, because he's just too good to stay in the championship for too much longer. They'll hope to hold on to him for the rest of the season, I'm sure. So far, like early days, look on Dundela look really good. Like the championship's mad; anybody can beat anyone in it. Ards finished 7th last year. The Ards were led the championship the first week in November and ended up finishing 7th, which is an indication of how crazy it can be, and you get odd results in it, and then teams will go through really bad periods and then they'll have really good periods. And it's a strange old league because everybody's really evenly matched, and it's really entertaining for that. If you're a loose end on Saturday, your Premiership team isn't playing, you could do a lot worse than going down to whoever your nearest championship club is, because high scoring games and unpredictable results. Like, you can look at the Premiership, and I know full well that, like, if Carrick are playing Linfield, like, Linfield are definitely going to win. Like, they just are. Sorry. You can never say that in the championship. Loughgall are the best team. Like, at the moment, if they have a game coming up against Knockbreda, who maybe people might consider to be the worst team, they only just avoid relegation on a playoff, would I be surprised if Knockbreda beat Loughgall? Nah, not really. Could happen. Does happen. Happens all the time. Ballyclare went to Newry last year off the back of this outrageously bad run, and Newry were flying top of the league, and Ballyclare beat Newry. Like, just crazy.
I'm not quite sure who's going to shake out from it all. Warrenpoint have got plenty of Premiership players still from last year. Dundela has loads of experience. It's like big, strong players with, as you said, the nippy guys up front. And, Welders are going to maybe find their form. Anna United still have a big core of that team that almost got to the top division last year. A fascinating division for sure. Welcome back to Fantasyland, but hold tight, football nerds, as we are in for a bumpy ride this week. 2 game weeks in 7 days. And yes, I know where you are, match day folks, coming out of the woodwork again to debate linguistics. But guess what? I don't care. It's a game week to me. GW for life. You've got 2 game weeks within 1 week. Deal with it. I may be just a bit grumpy because, like many of you, I have a lot to think about when it comes to transfers. I have 2 Linfield players that would be playing, plus there's injuries for some of my top scoring players. There are only 4 games which will count tonight, if you're listening to this on a Tuesday, towards points this game week, which means no Linfield, Newry, Glenavon or Larne. None of their players will score for you this game week. If you have 8 players from that crew, perhaps now is the time to click that little unlimited transfer button. But anxiety tells me we could be sitting in a very similar perilous position again in the future, so all the best with the tinkering. I feel like if I paid attention, I could have foreseen all this drama. If you did, well done, I don't care, but I didn't. So can we all move on, everybody? Please, thank you. In reality, you might have to carry a few non-scores this week. You won't be alone, so take some solace from that. But let's take the man leading the field on the nifantasyfootball.com website, one Simon Archibald. Sorry to single out here, Simon, but he has Cooper and Vertanen from Linfield. They did build for him last week. That's why he's number 1. He's got 2 Newry players and Ben Kennedy. Oh yes, I've been trying to suppress this news pretty much for most of the pod. Ben Kennedy went off injured on Friday night. Does that mean he's on the sidelines? I don't know. What about Jimmy McDonough? He didn't start on Saturday. He was one of the top scorers last season. What is happening there? And talking about being on the sidelines, one of the most picked players in the game, Levi Ives, was seen in crutches at Solitude on Saturday. So much to tinker with, and I only have 2 transfers. Right, parking all that injury drama, don't bin all those Newry and Glenavon players just yet, because you will have a double game week only for those 2 teams this week. Yes, at the end of the weekend, there'll be another game week, and they are going to be playing each other alongside their Saturday fixtures, which I'll be talking about after this in the pod. So you can get double bonus. Amazing. Good luck, everybody. Looking back at game week 2, McDermott and Shevlin for Coleraine were a deadly combination. I think many of us would love to flood our 11s with more than 2 players from Coleraine. Kirk Miller seems to be a consistent creator for Linfield, was looking well there, and Aidan Wilson of Glentoran in defence looks like he's got an eye for goal. Connor Keeley of Ballymena ran out as the top goal scoring player in points, his 15 points coming from a win, a full game, a clean sheet and a goal. Like most things, we can try to be smart about this, but you know that our fortunes ultimately lie this game week with the gods. I feel as though, as much as I've rambled on here, I should quickly reveal my Nibble fantasy football team while I'm here. The Kicking Match Dreamers, as you know them, and I do as well. Well, this is what they are as follows. I've had to drop Finlayson and Roscoe from Linfield to my bench. Not sure what I'm going to do with them, but they were starting in Europe and were rested at the weekend. Didn't go well for me. I also have McCarry in goal from Glentoran. That did go somewhat well for me with the win. McDermott has been subbed in. He's joined the Dreamers. Ives, it was nice knowing you. I'll maybe say hello to you later on in the season. Tilney is a mainstay. We all know that. And 4.5k Portadown wingback Aki02 has been promoted to the starting lineup. Not particularly by choice. I brought Heatley in for Kennedy, as I think he may be injured, but I have no information one way or the other. And somebody from that Crusaders attack that I just needed in to get Heatley in. Colerane's Lynch is still there. Cliftonville's McDonough is just going to have to stick around, as I can't change everybody. And McCulloch of Ballymena, he's tasty. He's in the middle of the park. Alongside Oisin Connolly. Yes, that wee guy you put in your team because you only had 4.5 left. He's playing, and hopefully he will do something against Crusaders. Bit of hit and hope there. It's Reece Campbell up top from Dungannon, partnering my captain for game week 3, Connor McMenamin in attack. That's my crew, and good luck to every player who is playing for the Dreamers, and exclusively them. Doodles, goodbye. Keith, have you got a fantasy team this year, or have you got an any
a fantasy team?
Yes, Irish League, listen, or
no, I can't. I can't be bothered with that, to be perfectly honest. I quite like the Sunday Life one because you don't need to change your captain every week. I don't like those ones because I forget in September and then never do it again. I'm much more of a Football Manager man. That's my my go-to. I like playing Football Manager. That's my kind of guilty pleasure. Always desperately trying to get Ards into Europe and always failing. That's kind of the dream.
This is where you tell me in 2030 you've got Ards in a big 60-seater stadium somewhere. But no, I wish you all the best in however you manage your fictitious teams, either on fantasy football or whatever. And again, like I said, I love me some Sunday Life 1. I've taken home some of the moolah by being a manager of the month twice. But let's look ahead to the next few games. The next time we have Irish League action, we get our first midweek selection of games. Looking ahead to them, Linfield and Larne is postponed because Linfield have that big game on Thursday. Some of the picks coming up on Tuesday, aka tonight, if you've downloaded the podcast when it first comes out. Ballymena against Cliftonville. It's a tricky one. Both seem out of sorts in a way, and maybe that will both cancel each other out.
Yeah, I mean, that is a tough one to call. I mean, Cliftonville are better than Ballymena, let's be blunt, but Cliftonville maybe haven't impressed so far. Ballymena obviously played well at Dungannon. Glenavon game was a bit weird. I'll go for a draw on that one.
I agree. Could be a few goals either side. Carrick welcome Coleraine. Coleraine look really, really sharp. But then again, Carrick Rangers have been in every game they've been in. They handled Newry very well. Unlucky against Cliftonville. But just seeing the nature of that Coleraine team, they are knitting together very well. And the likes of Evan McLaughlin, or maybe this is a chance for the likes of Conor McKendry or McCrudden to come on and throw their hat into the ring for a starting berth. Feels like Coleraine keep the form going into this one.
Taylor's Avenue is a difficult place to go on a Tuesday night. To give you a horrible cliche, but Coleraine are a team that don't mind getting stuck in, so I fancy Coleraine doing that.
Crusaders will want to make it right against Portadown at Seaview. I don't think Portadown have got a great record at Seaview, and anything that isn't a Crusaders win here will be one of the early shocks of the season for sure.
Yeah, Crusaders will win that, I'm sure.
Glentoran go to the Swifts. Could that be equally another shock? It feels like it's a nice chance to continue on the good result from last Friday.
I think Glentoran will enjoy playing on the 3G pitch. And it was always an excellent surface at Dungannon anyway. But I think Glentoran, good win on Friday night, impressive performance, still build on that again with a win on Saturday. On Tuesday. Dungannon haven't really got going yet.
By all accounts, Glenavon should have hosted Newry, but that's been moved to the following Tuesday. We look ahead to the end of the week. Coleraine, Glenavon, that feels like potentially fireworks up in the showgrounds. That's a Friday night fixture.
Glenavon will probably get 2 men sent off, won't they? I fancy Coleraine to win that. I think they are playing well, and Glenavon have not had necessarily a great start to this season. It's a weird one because Glenavon haven't actually played badly in either of their games. But I do fancy Coleraine to win.
I think that could just be a tight game, 0-0 potentially, I'm going to predict there. But imagine if Coleraine get, after 4 games, 12 points. They haven't, bar Cliftonville, beat any of the big boys, but that's really strong going if they were able to do that. Larne against Ballymena, that could be a bit tricky, down at Inver Park. It's not the televised game, it's another Friday night one, but that could be a real marker if Ballymena are able to get something out of that.
Yeah, it's been a tough couple of weeks for Larne. Let's be honest about it. They haven't, and even before that, they didn't particularly impress in Europe. I mean, a late winner at Glenavon, again, that didn't massively impress. Ballymena are doing all right. I'm going to say a draw on that one. Always a feisty one, that kind of a bit of a derby vibe going on with it. So I'll say a draw there, but it would massively surprise me if Ballymena won.
Yeah, I think so too. I just think maybe the missing the game during the week for Larne maybe could give them a bit more of a focus, and Friday night I kind of fancy Larne maybe to pull it all together, and particularly with Paul O'Neill finally off the mark, that could be just a good solid win for them. And then on TV on Friday, strange to say 3 games on a Friday, Portadown welcome Glentoran. And after all the things, I actually got told off by a few Portadown fans when I was there covering the game that I've been too harsh on them. Well, guess what, Portadown fans? I think you're going to nick a draw against Glentoran. And can we say, I think it will be be this Friday. I think we can properly say underneath the lights, because it should get darker, sadly, a bit earlier. I fancy the Ports to nick a draw here.
Glens will win. I'll say that.
I've got nothing to base it on, bar, I don't know, the magic of football.
I mean, Portadown Glentoran's always is another one that's a wee bit tasty.
Yes.
Really strange rivalry that nobody really knows why they're rivals. It's a bit of a Crystal Palace Brighton one, isn't it? I fancy the Glens for that one.
Rounding off this weekend's fixtures, only 2 on Saturday at 3 o'clock. You won't hear me in the radio, I think. Cliftonville hosts Dungannon Swifts. Dungannon don't really get a lot of wins against the big teams, and if all going well, it should be routine for Cliftonville, but look what we saw last week. You just never know.
No arguments are Cliftonville will win 3 points for the Reds.
And Newry against Crusaders, that's
interesting.
They host Crusaders. That, we saw how Newry were able to push men forward and really, at times, scare Linfield. That could be, if Crusaders are as open as they were against Glentoran at times, that could be an opening that Newry could slide in and get a result, particularly at home. I wouldn't put it past them.
Newly promoted teams quite often get like a famous result in the first month, don't they? So why not? I'll go for Newry for a win there. Let's not be boring.
And then our Sunday boys,
the biggest team, isn't it?
And then our Sunday boys, Linfield, they make the trip to Carrick. Lots of games to preview. We've rattled through them. Again, they'll either be licking their wounds or they'll be probably still celebrating from it. If Carrick were able to get a result there, they could just catch them. But in the form Linfield are on, if they get an early goal, it's game over.
Yeah, I mean, Linfield, if we're being honest with it, have had a fairly favourable fixture list to start things off. You couldn't really ask for better than Portadown, followed by Newry, followed by Carrick. So yeah, I think the Blues will win that regardless of what happens on Thursday. But they've had an easy start. Well, easy's hard, but a hard, not a nice word to use, but you know what I mean. They have had a relatively kind start. That means they'll have more difficult fixtures coming up. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would have been different matches altogether and a different lead into those big games if they were going against Glentoran or Cliftonville. Look, it's luck of the draw. I'm not suggesting it's one way or the other, but yes, fortune has definitely favoured the brave there in that situation. Keith, can I just say thank you so much for joining me today. When I started this, I wrote a big, massive list of people who I would love to have on, and I really do appreciate you coming on as you're someone that I always enjoyed listening to, and it's been a delight for me to have all these conversations with you. You're give incredible insight.
Oh, I try my best. It's nice to be asked on. I appreciate it, Peter, and good luck with the new venture. I mean, I think podcasts are a great vehicle for coverage of Irish League football, because they can go in depth where you maybe don't get the space on TV, radio, or in print. So thanks very much for that, and keep an eye on my Twitter timeline each week. We're doing lots of interesting stuff over the Belfast Telegraph and Sunday Life. We've really upped our Irish League coverage. I mean, the Irish coverage has traditionally been so strong over on that outlet, but we're doing a wee bit more. I'm trying to do a wee bit more championships. There's plenty going on there if you keep an eye on it.
I absolutely agree. I've stolen many talking points from the paper for this podcast and claimed it as my own. Keith, where can they find you? Would you say, as a man who has a misspelt second name with a D at the end for Cinnamon, for Bailie, they can find you, Keith, Bailie, online, Twitter, the best place?
It's Keith J. Bailie, but here, that is the most common way for spelling Bailie in Northern Ireland, so that is very much the Northern Irish way of spelling, as Noel will tell you.
Fantastic. Keith, thank you so much.
Thanks, bye.
It really was amazing to share the podcast with Keith this week. He's someone that I've looked up to for a number of years, and all it took was for me to set up my own podcast to finally pick up the courage to actually send him an email and try and force him to talk to me about Irish League football. I miss the social club as much as you do. At this point, I should probably say that next week there will be a kicking match, but with the whole bank holiday thing, I'm sure you're going to have a good time. It's going to interrupt me getting somebody in to record, so I'll more than likely be a day late. Sit tight, there will be a kicking match. It will be grand. You can find other ramblings in the meantime from me, from the pod, via the socials. Hey, I'm hip too. You can say hello to me at Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Just search Kicking Match. I've got them all. And if you want to take this podcast hands-free, technology, it's now available on what I believe are called smart speakers. We all know what they're called, but broadly, some people don't have the one that comes in a big brown box. Yes, finally, you have a way to broadcast this podcast to your whole family in your kitchen. Just say hello to your little friend and say, play Kicking Match, an Irish League podcast. Go on, give it a go. Trust me, you'll really like it. You'll feel really smart, and it'll be great. And a quick note, I must say this to a very special listener, to Nigel, who's celebrating a really big birthday. They really important in encouraging me to do this. They really helped push me towards getting this podcast off the ground. I don't know if I would have done this without their support, so I wanted to say thank you. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that you enjoy your week. It's a massive birthday. Have a great day, week, month, even a year. My email is open for thoughts, feelings, and spam. It's kickingmatch@gmail.com. Till then, enjoy your match if you go out to see one. And if we're being honest, what excuse do you have to not? You've got 2 chances, Tuesday, Saturday. Enjoy it. Thank you so much for your support, listening to this very thing. Let's catch up again soon. Bye.